Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's update to New Brunswickers. Bonjour à tous et bienvenue à la mise à jour concernant la terre.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's update on tariffs. Please make sure your microphones are off.
And ensure their microphones are placed on mute. Premier.
Thanks, everyone, and good morning. I want to start off by congratulating Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada, and all of the New Brunswickers that have been elected as members of Parliament to represent our province. I look forward to working with you in the months and years ahead. J'aimerais féliciter.
I would like to congratulate Premier Mark Carney, Prime Minister Mark Carney, rather, and all the new members. We are looking forward to working with you in the coming months. I was very impressed with the Prime Minister. From the beginning, he showed compassion, calm, and competence. He has managed our meetings very well, and I also saw a willingness from him to understand New Brunswick and what makes us unique here in Canada, which I appreciate a lot.
Around the First Minister's table, a calmness, a compassion, and a desire to understand New Brunswick and what makes us unique that I very much appreciated, because in the years to come we will be impressing upon him and his team how New Brunswick is unique and how we have needs that our partners of the federal government need to understand in order to build the kind of policies and partnerships that will best serve this province. So I wanted to also add that we're hopeful to see a number of New Brunswick voices around the cabinet table. Alors j'ai hâte de voir le choix du cabinet et j'espère voir des représentants du Nouveau-Brunswick dans ces choix-là. We need a strong partner at the federal level because there's a lot that we need to do here in New Brunswick that requires partnership between a federal government and the provincial government as well as our municipal partners. We have got to get all hands on deck to tackle the priorities that New Brunswickers have articulated to us. They've made it very clear that they want to see progress in our healthcare system, that they want affordable housing, that they want an economy that is growing and creating good paying jobs for New Brunswickers. And so we have drafted a letter that is being sent to the Prime Minister and his colleagues to lay out New Brunswick's priorities and the things that we are looking forward to working on together. On a besoin d'un partenaire fort.
We need a strong partner in Ottawa. We have many priorities that New Brunswickers have communicated to us that we want to see progress on those issues. We want everybody to be at the to work on, like improving our healthcare system and having more affordable housing and an economy that produces good paying jobs for New Brunswickers. This is why we wrote a letter to the Prime Minister that explains New Brunswick priorities. We mentioned what we want to work on with the new government to advance New Brunswickers' priorities.
Of what was in that letter, I think folks will be able to find it online, and it's been delivered to members of the media that are in this room. In the first instance, we are very supportive of the federal government's desire to see nation-building projects move forward because Canada is a big country, and New Brunswickers want access to it, as well as we want Canada's resources to have access to New Brunswick. We want to make sure that Canadians can get access to New Brunswick's ports to get their goods to new markets. We want to make sure that New Brunswick has unimpeded access to other markets in Canada for our products because we have some world-class products here that I know other Canadians would love to receive smoothly, easily, and with no barriers or additional costs. On veut donner au Canada accès.
We want to give Canada access to our ports that would give access to international markets. They need our infrastructure and We want to give New Brunswickers access, an unimpeded access to Canada's markets. Our products, which are world-class, should be available to Canadians without any barriers, and we want to work with the federal government on this.
Grid with the Canadian electricity system. That's in the best interest of New Brunswickers to have a resilient and strong energy and electricity system. And so we're looking to partner with the federal government to help us do that in the interest of strengthening and rendering more resilient our electricity. Healthcare. Healthcare is the #1 priority for New Brunswickers. It's the #1 priority of this government, and we were pleased to see that the federal government articulated support for healthcare infrastructure in their platform. So we will be going to them to talk about how those infrastructure supports are going to help us realize our goal of making sure that every New Brunswicker is attached to a family health team and a collaborative community care clinic all over this province. It's the #1 thing that we want to get done, and we're going to be looking for the federal government to be ready to move on their commitment to healthcare infrastructure very quickly. Le priorité numéro 1 des Néo-Brunswickois et Néo-Brunswickois.
The #1 priority of New Brunswickers is access to healthcare. We have the goal to make sure that every New Brunswicker is attached to a family healthcare team. We want to do that as quickly as possible. We heard that the federal government wanted to invest in our infrastructure, and we want to make sure that they are ready to invest in our infrastructure as soon as possible.
Minerals and the need for a strong federal partnership in that area. New Brunswick has 21 of the 34 minerals that the federal government has identified as critical in our province, and we want to see the responsible development of those minerals in a timely and competitive way. And so I was really pleased to see the Prime Minister's commitment to a one project, one permit model that we hope will respect the provincial jurisdiction that we have on minerals and assist us in making sure that we can have an aligned process to get all of the appropriate engagements and environmental pieces covered so that we can move some of our critical minerals that we desperately need to advance the green economy and our defense sector into production and creating the kind of jobs and economic development for New Brunswick that New Brunswickers really want. I have to talk about immigration when it comes to the federal government. Le Nouveau-Brunswick compte sur l'immigration.
New Brunswick relies on immigration for our continued growth and also for delivering services. We know that our hospitals and nursing homes will not remain open without newcomers to New Brunswick. We want a good federal partner for immigration so that our immigration system meets our needs here in New Brunswick.
Immigration to make sure that our economy can continue to grow, but also so that we can continue to deliver the basic services that New Brunswickers expect in healthcare and long-term care, and also to handle things like the construction demand that is coming from the boom in housing that we have to respond to. We need talented newcomers who have those trade certifications to help us get more affordable homes into the marketplace, and we need a federal government as a partner who recognizes New Brunswick's unique needs in this front. We appreciate their priority placed on Francophone immigration. We would like to see our fair share of seats in the provincial nominee program, and we certainly have more conversations to have around international students in post-secondary education. So those are some of the things on our list for immigration with the federal government. Finally, I want to talk about, so this is switching away from our demands of the federal government and on to something that's maybe a little bit more tariff related, because that's, I know, why we're here on a regular basis on Thursdays. I want to talk about the Campobello Ferry. Vicky, if you're about to ask the question, I'm going to preempt you. Minister Chasson is headed to Campobello today on the ferry, which is going to start operating early. So here we are May 1, and we're going to launch that ferry earlier than typically scheduled or planned in order to support residents of Campobello who were looking for access to New Brunswick without having to go to the U.S. this is really important to make sure that New Brunswickers are connected to New Brunswick. And so we're really glad that that ferry is getting in the water and providing those services sooner for the people of Campobello. I would encourage everyone in this room and everyone watching online to go and visit Campobello. It is a unique place and a beautiful place in New Brunswick. And you get the benefit of not just one ferry ride, but two, because you get to go over to Deer Island and then off to Campobello. And with the sun shining and the weather turning, it's a great time to go and visit that island. Alors, je vais partager que le ministre Chiasson...
Minister Chiasson is headed to Campobello on the ferry, which starts operating today. We are really pleased to have started the service early. It's very important for New Brunswickers living on Campobello to have access to New Brunswick without having to go through the U.S. to get there. We encourage you all to go visit Campobello. This is a very unique island. It's really beautiful and special, and now that spring is here, you get to go on 2 ferry rides to Deer Island and to Campobello. This is a very nice way to spend a weekend, so I encourage you to go visit the island.
Community support program under our tariff action plan to accelerate the operation of that ferry. And with that, I think that covers all the pieces that I have in front of me. I'm going to take 1 minute to add that I'm going to have to leave a little early because my daughter has to be on stage in Halifax before 5 o'clock, and so we have got to get in the car and go, and she is here to yank me out of this room on time, so I apologize if I'm not able to get to all your questions, but I have some personal duties that I have to attend to. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Bruce.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with questions from members of the media. Due to the limited time, each reporter will have one question. You have the right to pose your question in the official language of your choice. Nous allons maintenant procéder au...
We'll now proceed with questions from the media. We have a limited time for questions, so this is why you will all be able to ask one question. Jacques Poitras.
With the election result, we know that there will continue to be a requirement for an industrial carbon price and a federal standard. You promised a more robust provincial price in the election. Now that the election is clear, when will you proceed? How quickly? And does the tariff uncertainty change anything with that?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jacques. We did have a bit of a pause, I'll say, or a slowdown of the work on what New Brunswick's approach to emissions and climate would be, given we weren't clear on what the federal direction would be. And so now that the election is finished and we can expect to see a clearer sense of where this government is going to go on emissions caps and on the industrial price, we don't have because we still rely on some of those informations from the federal government. I can't give you a date on when we're going to have it done. We've got to get more clarity on how they're moving forward, because there's certainly been a lot of talk about removal of emission caps and other things. The tariff situation impacts it somewhat because we are constantly looking at how to strike the balance between being competitive and making sure that we have good jobs. You would have seen in our State of the Province when we laid out the metric that was specifically related to intensity of emissions per GDP, I think. I had to find the exact language, but it was measuring that growth and making sure that we're reducing the intensity of our emissions while still leaving room for both economic growth and possible emissions growth. So we're building under that framework, but we need a bit more time to get the next level of clarity from the federal government before we can finalize how New Brunswick is going to align with that.
Thank you. Hina Lam, Canadian Press.
Hi, Premier. With the tariff situation and Canadians visiting parts of Canada more this year and hopefully in the future, I was wondering if what New Brunswick is doing to ensure that covered bridges remain a tourist attraction and how is the government taking care of them? Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks, Hina. That's a great question, because covered bridges are a part of our both our identity and some of the uniqueness of New Brunswick, and we absolutely have tourists who come with the goal of trying to see and walk across or get to as many of them as possible, even though many of them are very old and in various states of repair and safety. And so we know there's been a conversation that's come up just recently in Florenceville around signage and how to make sure that it's still a really attractive place to get a great Instagram photo for the folks that are coming to visit, even though we have some issues that mean that you cannot drive on the bridge, but you can still walk on it, and the big orange signs don't make that clear. So let me get some more information from the Department of Tourism for you around what that strategy looks like in partnership with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure to make sure that those tourism assets are still being appropriately presented to all the people who want to come and visit them in the face of some of the infrastructure sort of asset issues that we're managing with those covered bridges.
Thank you. Reedy from Global.
Thank you. Thanks. Hello, Premier Holt. How do you think Mark Carney's win would impact our trade war with the U.S.?
Oh, thanks for the question, Reedy. I think that Mr. Carney has demonstrated, even as when he became Prime Minister previously, an ability to establish a relationship, at least where the President of the United States has been demonstrating respect toward Prime Minister Carney, has seemed to be open to good dialogue and negotiations with him, and that's important. At the same time, the rest of the team, with Minister LeBlanc and others, have been working very hard with Secretary Lutnick to get into the details of the issues that we have with their tariffs on autos and on aluminum in the market in Canada. And so we need to quickly move into renegotiating the USMCA, or the US-Mexico-Canada agreement that we have with the United States. And I think that Prime Minister Carney is exceptionally well positioned, both with his experience and his style and his ability to build those good relationships with our most important trading partner, that we're going to be able to get a great agreement done that is in New Brunswick and Canada's interests.
Thank you. Adam Heuris, Post Media.
Thanks, Bruce, and thanks, Premier. Premier, in your letter to Prime Minister Carney, you say resource corridors are urgently needed. What's a realistic timeline on that for you? What needs to happen next? And then what's New Brunswick's role in all of that?
That's a great question, because timelines in these kinds of projects are complicated to predict, and I think we're at actually a state of considering the art of what's possible, because there has been quite a bit of talk of establishing trade corridors, energy corridors, resource corridors. What does that mean exactly, right? Are we talking pipelines? Are we talking rail? How are we looking at moving goods and resources from, in this case, from west to east, but also from east to west, and what might we be able to do to better connect this country economically, as well as for people? And so there isn't a project that, to my knowledge, that's been laid out. And if we look at the old boundaries of what was the Energy East project, so much has changed since then in terms of the physical infrastructure and how that pipe is being used today, that we're looking at a different conversation around an entirely new pipeline, and if is that possible, and if it's 4,000 kilometers, and I can get into the weeds, but I won't, because it's like we're starting from scratch, imagining what is possible, looking at what's out there, but there's a lot of alignment between the premiers and the federal government on the need to strengthen and build our trade and energy and resource infrastructure in order to be able to move these valuable assets and products to Tidewater, to new markets, and to each other. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the federal government take the lead on building that strategy of what is possible, and for New Brunswick to be at the table very clearly laying out the assets that we have in our refinery, in our ports, in our airports, in our rail system, and the resources that we have to offer the rest of Canada, and how we'd like to benefit from their resources to make sure that the investments that Canada is making really benefit the people and the economy of New Brunswick.
Thank you. Avery, CTV.
Good morning, Premier, and thank you for taking the time. I think a lot of residents in St. John are going to be very happy to see Sims Corner redevelopment mentioned specifically in this letter. How much of a priority is that for the province, and should it be for the federal government to help out?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Avery. Sims Corner is a significant priority for the province because it serves so many different interests. We have a growing port in the Port of St. John, which means the kind of container traffic that we're seeing that we love and we're really excited about is moving through Sims Corner at a more and more frequent rate. And folks in St. John know that you sit in that intersection sometimes a long time when you're waiting for those trains to get through, and more of them are going to be coming, and they might be longer and longer. And so there's a quality of life experience for the people who live around there, including the pedestrians and the others that use that infrastructure. And then you have the mill and the mill modernization project and everything that's happening there that's also going to impact that same infrastructure. Then we're looking at inland port opportunities that are going to drive more traffic, both physical and rail, through that intersection. So it's critical to the growth of the port, to the success of the mill, to the quality of life of the people of St. John who use that critical juncture to get to and around the city, and it's critical to some of our economic development aspirations that need to leverage the smooth flow of goods through that. So it's something that the federal government needs to be a partner at the table with, because that is a prime example of a trade corridor and the infrastructure that supports the movement of goods into other countries and to other provinces. So we expect to see them at the table for that one.
Alex, excusez Villeneuve.
Merci.
Thank you. The way that you announced your cuts was criticized this week. For example, for social development, Kelly Lamarck had to publish a report to say these are budget cuts, which your government never recognized, and there were investments that were announced, and the next day we learned that there were cuts in the districts, and there are people who think that the way of presenting this is not the most honest. What do you have to say? Well, I appreciate that when we get requests for money, even though we increased the funds invested in the education system, it was perceived as cuts. So we increased funds by $200 million, $100 million more for schools districts. They imagine how they would spend their money, but we showed our priorities for the system to stabilize classrooms. We need more human resources, such as teachers and teachers' assistants, to improve literacy in the province. So even though they wanted this much money, we gave them more money, but not as much as they wanted. So their impression is that it's more than what they wanted, but it's more than what they got last year. So you have to determine where the line is. Is it how much you got last year? So that is more money, but their expectations were higher, so to them it was less money. But we invested in education the highest amount in a very long time, with an extra $200 million. We need to show teachers that we will be helping them with resources in the classroom that they need to improve the experience for their retention and to improve the results of students. We are focusing on the classroom. We have industries that have several employees, and we are asking them to invest not in their offices, but in the classrooms and in the students.
I will try, but now I'm looking at the clock, and I have about one more minute, I think, before we've got to hop onto the road. So, okay. So I can appreciate that depending on where you're standing, your perspective on the budget is different. We had districts that had asked for a certain amount of money, and we didn't give them as much as they asked for. And so that can feel like a cut, even though we put $200 million more money in the education budget compared to what they actually spent last year, as well as what was budgeted to have been spent. And that includes $100 million more into the districts, we did specify that we wanted to see that those funds and the district budgets that are $1.6 billion to be invested in the classroom and in teacher supports and as close to the students as possible. We wanted to see them invested in ways that are going to help us achieve the commitment that we made at the state of the province to increasing literacy and numeracy rates for students across the province. And so we did give them more money and directed how we wanted to see that invested. We want the money to move from offices to classrooms, to teachers and to students. And we've asked the districts to partner with us in doing that. But I can appreciate that with their ask and their expectation of even more money, they received more than they had last year, but less than what they asked for. And so I think your perspective on that depends on where you're standing.
Dernière question. Alexandre Boudreau, l'Acadie Nouvelle.
Last question, Alexandre Boudreau, Acadie Nouvelle. 3 seconds, Alex. Could you please deactivate your microphone? Sorry, I did not hear my name. I believe that you were asked a similar question in English, but when you talked about national construction projects, are you supporting pipelines? Do you think that there is a good reason for having a pipeline? So the conditions are different from what they were a few years ago. The idea that New Brunswick could benefit from getting resources from the west to here to our refineries is interesting. We understand that they have large projects, difficult projects, and they need a united Canada with all provinces working together. I believe that the opportunity is here with a united Team Canada with a common interest in trade and resources, and we need to assess the potential. How can we imagine our infrastructure with pipelines and rail to develop the New Brunswick's economy and to diversify our global trade and to unite our country?
Very much.